Welcome everyone. Thanks a lot for staying with us. You're watching Plain Speak with me, Shivani Gupta. Let's bring you a quick look at the top 6 developments coming in at 6 p.m. In a fresh satellite imagery, the IDF shows precision strikes on Iranian leadership compound. Numerous munitions dropped on the presidential office. Latest footage shows destruction to Dubai's Jebel Ali port. Plumes of smoke were seen rising from the port as Iran continued its retaliation. Iranian missiles struck the Beersheba tech area, damaging buildings near a major technological park. Reports indicate that a facility linked to Microsoft was amongst the sites impacted. War escalates and so does the casualty number. Iran says death toll from US-Israel strikes rises to 787. India expresses grave concerns over the West Asia war, says 1 crore Indians work in the Gulf and security and stability of the region impacts Indian economy. Oil Ministry says it will source petroleum products through non-Strait of Hormuz routes. Qatar and UAE lash out at Iran over the continuous missile strikes on civilian areas and critical oil infra projects. UAE reiterates it is fully prepared for war and it can fend off aerial threats for an extended period. All right, let's first get you the big story that we're tracking right now, which is the American response or the American justification to this entire war. The West Asia conflict escalating into a bloody, high-stakes confrontation. The recent decapitation strike against Iran's leadership was hailed by Washington as a preemptive defensive measure. Yet Tehran has refused to surrender, retaliating with missiles and drone attacks. American officials insist they are hitting key military targets to neutralize threats, but the world and even Americans at home remain confused about why the attacks began. Was Iran truly an imminent threat, or did the US act prematurely, sparking a wider war? Now, the stakes are enormous. Ethical questions, unclear objectives, and inconsistent messaging threaten American assets, while Gulf nations too continue to get pounded and global allies watch nervously. We will, of course, get you exactly what is the frame of mind as far as these Gulf countries are concerned, because all of them have come under attack now and are under continuous attacks. Even today, through the afternoon, we've heard of more and more key installations, even a tech park, for example, coming under attack under these strikes. So as the missiles continue to fly, the question is, has America truly justified its actions in Iran, or has it plunged the world into another unpredictable war? Take a look at how this has gone on so far as the justifications are concerned. Now, first, Donald Trump launched the rhetoric saying that when they are done, by the time they are done, he told the Iranian people, take over your government. He said this would be your best chance in a long time to have your own say. The message was clear. The US was openly calling for regime change. But next, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, when he spoke last evening, he signaled a complete shift. He said, and I quote, "This is not a so-called regime change war, but the regime sure did change." He also went on to say that they don't actually believe in those endless wars of the past. This is not Iraq, he said. This president understands that they're not into nation building or democracy building. Suddenly, the official line was no longer about overthrowing the government, even as the leadership was decimated. Then, Secretary of State Marco Rubio framed the operation in a completely military term, as he said that the real reason was to eliminate the threat of Iran's short-range ballistic missiles and naval threat. The focus has moved on to neutralizing Iranian capabilities rather than political goals. The American message has evolved from regime change to denial of regime change to defensive mission, leaving allies and, frankly, the larger public scrambling to understand the US objectives. And Marco Rubio was pressed on this. Even he was frustrated while explaining the reasons.
I don't understand what the confusion is. Let me explain it to you. The United States is conducting an operation to eliminate the threat of Iran's short-range ballistic missiles and the threat posed by their Navy, particularly to naval assets. That is what it is focused on doing right now, and it's doing quite successfully. I'll leave it to the Pentagon and the Department of War to discuss the tactics behind that and the progress that's being made. That is the clear objective of this mission.
Now, by all accounts, it is not going to be as cut and dry or as single focused. America's objectives are multifold, even if the messaging has been a little bit confusing. So let's break those down for you. And those objectives are going to be possibly met in a long-term war or conflict now, as Donald Trump has indicated. First, of course, is to eliminate, as they called, the imminent threats which are posed by Iran's growing missile program and hostile actions. Donald Trump suggested one of them could actually be capable of landing in American soil, which cynics say is not the truth. American forces, their allies, all of them are top priority. The second priority is to stop Iran's nuclear ambitions that has not been hidden by America, to ensure that Iran can never obtain a nuke. Even here, though, there are critics who believe Iran wasn't close to developing one. Third, the United States is aiming to destroy Iran's missile capabilities, its naval power, hitting ballistic missile sites, naval assets, and critical military infrastructure. Fine. Fourth, leaders say one goal is to punish Iranian support for terrorism in the region, something that has even been targeting America for nearly 50 years. And they've not shied away from saying that this was a terrorist regime, this was an unjust, evil regime. Fifth, the campaign is meant to stop Iran's wider power projection across the Middle East, limiting its influence and ability to destabilize neighboring states. And finally, the operation is a means of supporting the destruction of key Iranian leadership that can't be ruled out. And of course, that is something that they had started off with, giving that hope to the Iranian public. Donald Trump said, "I promised help to the Iranians and I have delivered on that." With so many aims on the table, though, the debate is whether these objectives can be achieved without a prolonged regional conflict, which everyone would want to avoid. But the big question is also this today. Was America pushed into the military action and abandoned the talks that they were holding only because Israel pushed them? Well, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio's statement certainly seemed to suggest that, and Iran has latched onto it. So take a look at what Marco Rubio said. He said, "We knew that if Iran was to be attacked, even by someone else," he's talking about Israel here, "they would immediately come after us, and we were not going to sit here and absorb a blow before we responded." So he basically suggested Israel gave us no choice. They were going to attack. We absolutely had to become a part of it. And look what Iranian foreign minister said. He says, "Rubio admitted what we all knew. US has entered a war of choice on behalf of Israel. Shedding of both American and Iranian blood is thus on Israel firsters." He said this is Israel first policy, not America first. He also added, "American people deserve better and should take back their country." Listen in to what Marco Rubio had said. This statement could well become an albatross around the neck of both US and Israel.
There absolutely was an imminent threat, and the imminent threat was that we knew that if Iran was attacked, and we believed they would be attacked, that they would immediately come after us. And we were not going to sit there and absorb a blow before we responded, because the Department of War assessed that if we did that, if we waited for them to hit us first after they were attacked, and by someone else, Israel attacked them, they hit us first, and we waited for them to hit us, we would suffer more casualties and more deaths. We went proactively in a defensive way to prevent them from inflicting higher damage. Had we not done so, there would have been hearings on Capitol Hill about how we knew that this was going to happen and we didn't act preemptively to prevent more casualties and more loss of life.
Right. We're also, of course, getting more breaking updates that the Prime Minister has now spoken to one more Gulf country, Kuwait's leadership, after all of these attacks that have been continuing. So he's, remember, spoken to UAE and other countries in the last 2 days. He has now spoken to the Premier in Kuwait as well. This is the big update that we're getting right now. We'll get you details as we get it as well. So he has spoken to the Amir of Qatar, and there have been earlier talks with the other leaders as well. Remember, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has been consistently condemning the retaliatory strikes by Iran on these Gulf countries, particularly targets which are civilian in nature or key infrastructure. And that has not gone down well either with the Gulf countries or with their allies. And India has definitely stood with its Gulf country allies in this hour, condemning condemning the unplanned attacks from Iran, not just against US bases alone, but also attacking civilian infrastructure, those living in residential buildings, hotel buildings, airports, while people were there inside airports, etc. I am also joined by Sanjay K. Verma, former Indian diplomat, joining us. Sir, your first comments on the Prime Minister speaking to so many leadership of the Gulf countries, one more Gulf country that he has spoken to today, clearly setting out an agenda as far as India is concerned.
Prime Minister Modi has one thing on his mind, and that is the safety of India's citizens spread all over the Middle East. And that is why he is connecting with all the leaders in the Middle East to seek their assurances that Indians will be safeguarded. Second point, which is extremely important, is when it comes to a regime change, which you mentioned a little early, regime change doesn't mean just taking out a leader. That regime has been there for last 40 years plus. And therefore, the entire structure of the government is the regime. I don't think that objective has been reached. And just knocking out the supreme leader of Iran does not really mean changing the regime.
Just hold your thought there. I'm going to come back to you, sir, on your thoughts on the messaging that we've been seeing from America and how other countries would be perceiving it, including their domestic audiences and opposition to Donald Trump in America. I want to go across to my colleague Akansha also, who's joining us. Akansha, give us the latest on the conversation that the Prime Minister has had.
Right. So it's very important to highlight that while Prime Minister Modi has spoken to the Amir of Qatar, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, he's not just condemned the attacks on Qatar, but he's also thanked the Amir for his support and care of the Indian community in Qatar. Now, there's in fact a significant Indian diaspora over there, and Qatar happens to be one of those liberal, moderate Islamic nations, not just apart from being a US ally. The fact of the matter is that of late in the last decade, ever since Prime Minister Modi came to power, we've seen that there's been an increase and ramping up in the overall bilateral trade relationship between Qatar and India. In fact, there are several economies that are now closing down to expatriates, and apart from the fact that when the H-1B visa crackdown started happening, people were inadvertently looking towards the Middle East, and Qatar was one viable option. So that apart, let's talk about the oil trade. Qatar happens to be one of our largest LNG suppliers, and that in itself is a growing worry given that the Strait of Hormuz has been locked down by Iran. So it's important that India stands in solidarity with one of its key bilateral trading partners. India has in fact been very supportive of all of these US allies, given that India's stance on terrorism has been amply clear that any form of terror or any form of violence or violent retaliatory measures will not be supported by India. And Prime Minister Modi has always urged for dialogue and diplomacy to take place, as has been the statement of the ME as well. Shiva.
Yes, and as it is not lost on anyone, we've got a large population of Indians working and living in these countries. So in the last 48 hours, the Prime Minister has spoken to leaders of UAE, Israel, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Bahrain, Oman, Kuwait and Qatar. 8 countries in total, 7 of them being these Middle Eastern countries, of course, barring Israel, that the PM was also visiting just before this attack began. Sanjay K. Verma, former diplomat, continues to be with us. Sir, I'm coming back to you. Now I want to focus a little bit more on the American messaging, from freeing the Iranian people, from the regime change, from the slaying of Ali Khamenei. Now they're kind of trying to justify their decapitation strikes, which were the first strikes, as a more larger military objective. How do you read into their messaging, and is the world buying it?
I don't think the world is buying their messaging. It's highly fragmented, highly discoherent. And the reason is basically that probably the reasoning and logics were not put in place before they went into this war. And therefore, the messaging is also coming out as something which is incoherent. But there again, if the key objectives were to be achieved in a couple of days' time, that was the initial messaging. Why is it taking so long? And which means it was not only the narrative which was miscommunicated or misconstrued, but it was also the strategy which had to be reconsidered as something which was amiss.
And you know, Marco Rubio's statement, which I also read out a short while ago, where he said, we knew that if Iran was to be attacked, even if by someone else, we'd have to be a part to it. And that simply points to Israel. Is this something that is going to mount some internal questions against the Donald Trump administration, given that, you know, you have to give very clear reasons as to why you are invading or attacking a country? If imminent threat was the reason, Iran now says, this suggests there was no imminent threat to America from Iran.
See, US being a beacon of democracy, as they always call themselves, the entire thing is anti-US constitution as well. The strike should have had gotten the nod from the Congress. They had not got that. So therefore, even from the US legal point of view or constitutional point of view, the strike was missing a few legalistic points. When you come outside the US, you look at Europe. Europe is no more buying what US is saying as the narrative. Spain had asked their bases, US bases to be shut down and leave Spain. If you look at UK, the way in which it has offered its use of its bases, that is also quite discordant with the relationship that the UK always had with the US as the ally. Look at the French narrative, look at the German narrative. So there is a rift brewing in EU as well on the narrative itself. Forget about other things. The legality can be questioned by the jurists, whether international or domestic.
All right. Stay with me, sir. I also want to now talk about how United States' top nuclear negotiator has made a startling accusation, and it strikes at the heart of global fears over Tehran's nuclear ambitions, but also this might be one of the justifications America provides for going into Iran. According to the US envoy Steve Witkoff, Iranian negotiators openly told American officials that they controlled about 460 kilograms of uranium enriched to about 60%, a level just below weapons grade and far above what's needed for peaceful energy programs. That amount, Witkoff said, is enough material for 11 nuclear bombs if it was further refined. So let's break down for you how advanced is really Iran's so-called nuclear program. Remember, these are based on various estimates or reports. Nobody really knows or has an exact idea. Iran currently allegedly holds approximately 441 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%. The stockpile is over 9,000 kilograms total enriched uranium mass. The challenge is that this uranium needs to be 90% enriched for becoming a nuclear arm. An existing stockpile could have been enough for 10 to 11 nuclear devices. This is what the watchdog is also estimating. Sanjay sir, I'm coming back to you. Do you think this would provide enough succor to those who may be looking for the legitimate reasons as to why US went into Iran? And could these estimates be correct?
Estimates seem to be correct, but the problem is that if the negotiations break down, do the countries go on war? And that is the main pillar of the entire narrative. So that means that if India and China is conducting a negotiation doesn't succeed, does it mean that we start inflicting harm on each other? So it's a larger global sense which we need to get out of it. From the data and details which have come out, I don't think this was good enough a reason for launching an attack and putting the entire world into darkness.
I also want to shift our attention now to the other big update, and which is that Iran has announced that it has shut down the Strait of Hormuz and warned that any vessel attempting to pass could be targeted and set on fire. Remember, this is a very important stretch between these Gulf countries and Iran, with Dubai at its closest tip, which is home to about 20 to 25% of all global oil trade, passing through this very narrow and shallow stretch called the Strait of Hormuz. This remains one of the world's most critical oil choke points, with global economies relying heavily on this. Before we talk more about this, let's also bring you another update that we're tracking. Donald Trump has released another statement. He has gone on to say on Iran, air defense, air force, navy, leadership is gone. They want to talk. I said, too late. This is the message that is coming in from the American president now. Just a day or two ago, he had said, I want them on the negotiating table and I'll be happy to negotiate. Iran said, we don't want any negotiations with Washington anymore. But now Donald Trump is saying, maybe because of the continuous retaliation against its Gulf partners, that there's not going to be any more talks. He says that Iranian air defense, air force, navy and leadership is all gone. They want to talk now, but I said, too late. We'll also get you more as far as this latest statement is concerned. Is this closing the doors? Is it shutting the door on any negotiations with Iran anymore? Remember, Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu have already warned that they're not going to stop. They have talked about a weeks-long action, and they're saying that because of Iranian response, they're going to now double the impact of their original strikes. Both Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu have warned that they're going to hit Iran so badly that it would be worse than what it was earlier. We'll get you more updates on this as Donald Trump is releasing one more statement as far as the strikes on Iran are concerned. He says the Iranian air defense, the air force, navy and leadership is all gone. So what does it mean for Iran, even though it continues to mount those attacks? Remember, the Iranian military or Iranian representatives have already said that their military is working independently, all units are working independently. They will do what they deem fit because, of course, the top leadership is gone. The primary attacks were already done. The secondary and the tertiary attacks will also follow, is something that both Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu have already warned about. Let's go across to Rahul Shivshankar joining us from our newsroom. Rahul, big statement coming in from Donald Trump once again. Yeah, we'll go across to Rahul in just a bit, but we're showing to you on your screen the latest statement that has been released. This is a written one. Of course, in the past, he has not only released written statements, but also structured bites that he has released earlier. Rahul is back with us. Rahul, if you can hear me, big statement coming in from Donald Trump.
Yeah, very big statement. Look, many people were thinking that the fact that he had assassinated or decapitated the Iranian regime and the 50 leaders, that would be sufficient for Donald Trump to come out and claim victory and call an end to this campaign and say that, look, I've achieved what I wanted to, and tell the American people that he had done what no other American president had done since 1979, though they had tried. But that is an option that he has foreclosed by suggesting that he's not in any mood to negotiate with the Iranian regime. And this is exactly what I was saying. If this war is to have any meaning or any real end to it, there has to be regime change. So once again, you're seeing a sort of flip-flop, because Trump first said that I'm not interested in regime change. Then he went on to say this is about regime change. Then he says I'm a man of peace. Then he goes and carries out a preemptive strike, which is actually a euphemism for a decapitation strike. Then he says, well, we're not interested in regime change. We have achieved the objectives that we set out to, which is decapitated Iran's leadership, hopefully brought up a new crop of leaders which would be less radical, more open, more amenable to working with the West, and obviously declaring their nuclear program open for public scrutiny or for UN scrutiny and so on and so forth. But here, once again, he's done a U-turn of sorts by saying, well, we aren't done. We're going to go the whole hog. Obviously, this would include regime change. We won't stop Iran attacks. And this is also a message that will sort of send a bit of a chill down the spine of some of the others in the Gulf, the allies that have played host to American bases, because they will come out and say that, look, we are getting mashed here between your war with Iran and our interests. And I think a large number of balls are now up in the air, really, because the Iranians will have to factor this in if the Americans are in it for the long haul, if Trump has refused negotiations, that means he's looking at a military endgame. And the Iranians will have to recalibrate, because if they were thinking that the US would perhaps backpedal and in about 3 or 4 weeks would perhaps end hostilities, then they are mistaken. At least this is what Trump is saying. Now, whether this is a bargaining tactic to get leverage, he's done that, of course, taken maximalist positions, even when it has come to trade diplomacy or tariff suasion. So we don't quite know what Trump's idea is, but there's been a lot of chatter amongst the experts and geostrategists that they're not seeing what the end game is without putting boots on the ground in Iran. Just carrying out these mass ballistic/surgical strikes is not going to attenuate the Iranian regime enough for them to sort of walk away from power and come groveling to the United States of America. So we don't quite know what is the agenda that is driving Trump, but quite clearly, at least as of now, this forecloses the possibility of this war ending anytime soon.
Right. Rahul, thank you for joining us and putting this into perspective. Certainly, these questions are mounting now. What was the objective to begin with, and how soon can America and Israel achieve those objectives? Because as I turn to our next big talking point, this is a global economy issue now. As we've been telling you, the Strait of Hormuz has been blocked by Iran because of this war. Was it necessary to begin with and to thrust the entire global economy into uncertainty? The big question right now on everybody's mind is, what is the alternative to the Strait of Hormuz? So let me just bring to you, the Gulf region has some limited backup routes to keep oil flowing. Let's take you through those alternatives to the Strait of Hormuz. First up is the Saudi Arabia's East-West pipeline. This goes directly to the Red Sea. This has a capacity of about 5 million barrels per day, and it can be expanded to about 7 million. So let me just point this out to you on the map. This is the Strait of Hormuz, which is now blocked. This is Saudi Arabia, and on the other border of Saudi Arabia is the Red Sea. Now here is their port of Yanbu, which is also capable of sending out oil barrels to the rest of the world, although its capacity is only about 5 million per day barrels versus 20 million per day of the Strait of Hormuz. So this is one of those routes that can be employed. Of course, it's not going to be able to take it over completely. As far as this route is concerned, why is this important? Because it completely bypasses the Strait of Hormuz. You don't really need to go to that side, and you're not affected as far as this blockade is concerned. Let's also move forward as far as the other options are concerned. So like I said, moves the crude from eastern oil fields to the Red Sea, and it bypasses the Hormuz entirely. But there is another option, again a limited option, and wouldn't quite fulfill the requirement completely, which is the UAE's Abu Dhabi crude oil pipeline. This goes through the Gulf of Oman. This can carry about 1.5 million barrels per day directly to the port of Fujairah, and this also makes the Strait of Hormuz blockade not important, because this is, as you can see on the map, just before the Strait of Hormuz. So this port of Fujairah is here in close to Dubai. This is before the narrowest point of the Strait of Hormuz. So even if this is blocked and nothing can go in and out to the Persian Gulf, here in the Gulf of Oman, from here at least, the ships and vessels can travel. And again, this is not going to completely replace the Strait of Hormuz, but this lies ahead of the Hormuz, enabling uninterrupted exports even during a blockade. So this is the alternative route that countries will possibly be looking at right now. We don't quite know what are the preparations that have been made as far as this is concerned. Moving on, an important aspect of the action in Iran and elimination of Ayatollah Khamenei is how the women of Iran feel and have reacted. Let's get you some of those reactions from around the world. Iranian women's national football team made headlines after what came across like a refusal to sing the national anthem during their Asian Cup opener against South Korea, a gesture that went viral very quickly, viewed as a mark of quiet defiance against a regime that particularly suppressed women. Beyond the field, women across the Iranian diaspora have also, of course, shown their shock. We're getting some more breaking updates now coming in. Iran has now said that it is ready for negotiations, but there will be no compromise on dignity. So there seem to be some developments happening very, very quickly. Just a short while ago, we had Donald Trump saying they asked for talks. I said it is too late. Iran is now coming out and saying we do want negotiations now, but with no compromise to our dignity. Does this mean now that the leadership, the clerics, the IRGC is now on its knees? Because remember, just yesterday they had indicated that there will be no talks with Washington anymore. So the big update that's coming in right now, back to back, is that while Donald Trump is playing hardball now, saying there's going to be no more talks with Iran, their air defense and their air power, their naval power, their ground support, everything is gone, their leadership is gone. Iran is now saying that they're ready for talks, but will US now negotiate with them anymore? Has Iran lost the chance that it had maybe till yesterday evening to do these negotiations is the big question. They're saying they don't want any compromise on their dignity, but they're now onto the table after rejecting any possibility of negotiations with America just yesterday. Akansha is joining us with more on this. Akansha, this is a flip-flop on all sides.
Absolutely, and these mixed messages are not just coming from the United States, but you're also getting them from the Iranian side. Remember, the former IRGC head and part of the transition in Iran, that is, in fact, Ali Larijani, who was playing the role of a power broker, was initially reported to have said that we are ready for talks, but then he took to X and he said that no, there is absolutely no scope for talks. But now, again, a close aide to Khomeini indicating that they are indeed ready for negotiations is an indication that perhaps Iran is also now very much aware that they cannot sign up for a war of attrition. As we all know, we've been debating that Iran is finding itself extremely isolated. Look at their allies. They are nowhere around, whether it is North Korea, Russia, primarily China, one that is actually exchanging technology, providing them with intelligence as well, has in fact completely backed off in terms of providing them with any assistance, and that's a classic China playbook. But that aside, initially there were indications coming from the United States also that there could be a scope for negotiations. Sorry. But as you rightly highlighted, Donald Trump has already ruled out that possibility now. Shivani.
Yes. So what does that mean as far as the end of this conflict is concerned? Akansha, that will be the big question, isn't it? Everybody would want that maybe they can get onto the table and agree on to certain terms.
That's going to give Iran, in fact, if you look at the upper hand, that clearly is in the hands of the United States and also of Israel, because now US is going to be in a position of strength. They will ensure that they dictate the terms and conditions of a more moderate sort of a government, even if it were to be with the IRGC or say the Shia Islamic Cleric Council to be a part of that transition.
Absolutely. So we'll wait and see what could be the terms, if at all, and would there be a different Iranian regime now? Time for a very short break. My colleague Anand is joining you on the other side.